Hi there everybody, welcome to this week's edition of The Verdict. We have 6 races for you. It's a tough decision this week to decide which 6 to include in the programme. Such was the quality of racing on Racing TV throughout the week. And nonetheless, I think I've picked out some of the best, principally from the Cambridgeshire meeting at Newmarket. We'll also go to the Curragh and to Dundalk as well later on in the programme. But it's at Newmarket where we start, where the Cambridgeshire meeting threw up some tremendous performances. And we'll start with the Cheveley Stakes, Group 2 over 1 mile. The ground was quick, good to firm, good in places officially. And for the Cheveley, Master of the Seas was sent off favourite at 11-8. Benbatl, looking to win this race for the second year on the bounce, was installed as second favourite at 13-8. And he did indeed prevail in a race that was run at an even gallop and produced a very fast time. Send them on their way. Benbatl's always prominent in the Godolphin Blue, and Pogo is there with him, and they finished 1-2 and they were always prominent. Master of the Seas was third, he's Godolphin colours white cap, and back in fourth was Lane Cash, who sat in third place. So being prominent seemed to be important, as it often is here on the Rolly Mile, and the 1-2 were always a 1-2. A couple of important points to make about racing the Cambridgeshire meeting this year, and it's often the case. Firstly, the Rolly Mile suits horses that are ridden up with the pace generally, and also the stands rail is often the place to be. And I think this meeting, it definitely conferred an advantage to horses who raced against that rail, and it has sent Pogo up the rail to a career best effort in second place here in the Cheveley Stakes. But he wasn't good enough to see off Benbatl, who was back to his best here. He'd been touched off at Goodwood on his seasonal reappearance, where he's perhaps a little bit ring rusty and he was a bit keen, possibly did too much out in front. Here he settled better under Oisin Murphy, and he's battled on really strongly in the closing stages off a decent gallop. The finishing speed percentage was 102.14. That's telling us that they've gone a good gallop, they've gone a good even pace out in front, and he's picked up well in the closing stages, Benbatl. Here he comes to challenge Pogo, and he produces a very good final time, 1:34.56. That's really quick when under the Racing Post standard by 1.54 seconds. And that's because he's a good horse and he's racing on fast ground. There was also a pretty strong tailwind pushing them along. So when you analyse times at Newmarket from the Cambridgeshire meeting, do keep an eye on the fact that there was a strong tailwind and there was a bit of a bias towards that stand side rail. They split somewhat into 2 groups. I think the one horse who was perhaps inconvenienced was Master of the Seas in the Godolphin Blue with the white cap. He came home quite strongly in the end against the stands rail, and he was coming here off a long layoff. He'd been off 146 days. There he had to switch. I think he was a tad unlucky, and you could perhaps mark him up just a little bit for his finishing effort. But Benbatl just too strong, too good. He's been a fantastic campaigner over the years, and Syed bin Saror, his trainer, has his horses in tremendous nick at the moment. A fast time telling us that Benbatl's all there. He's not on the downgrade, even though he's a 7-year-old. There is plenty more to come from this horse, and perhaps he'll be aimed at the Dubai World Cup. They did think about that in the past, and he has won on the dirt at Maiden, so they may think about that, and possibly the Kipco meeting at Ascot, although he doesn't want too much give in the ground, even though his dams by Selkirk, he really wants decent top of the ground that he got here, and he's been a fantastic horse for Oisin Murphy over the years. It'd be fair to say, I think, that he launched Oisin's career with a win at Royal Ascot in the Hampton Court Stakes, and he's a fantastic racehorse, and that was a really good performance. And he didn't race against the rail. Pogo did, and he was propelled into a very good second place, but Benbatl was just way too good. So how can we sum this up then? Well, final time was good. I've highlighted that, 1:34.56. New track record, dipping under the Racing Post standard by 1.54, but the tailwind had a fair bit to do with that, along with a good horse out in front on fast ground. Secondly, Benbatl. He was the horse that launched Oisin Murphy's career, and he really must have a soft spot for this fella. You can see there the affection that he holds him in, and he won the Hampton Court Stakes at Royal Ascot, and Oisin's had a tremendous time with this horse ever since. So the Dubai World Cup, it's a possibility, isn't it? They wanted to have a crack at this race. That was definitely the aim prior to COVID kicking in, and they might just have another go. As I said, he's won on the dirt at Maiden, and they might have another crack at that. Although he can cut it on turf, we know that, and perhaps the QE2 might be a place for him. Or the Champion Stakes, maybe. QE2 might be a better race for him, but I'm not sure that autumn soft ground is what he wants necessarily. Going to keep an eye on Master of the Seas going forward. I think he's shaped with a fair bit of promise. Had to be switched left in the closing stages. He was a bit too far back in the run as well. And off 146-day layoff, that was a very good effort from him. And I think he might win before the season is done. But Benbatl, what a warrior he is. And he's still got a big engine. The next three races that we're going to have a look at here on the verdict are all two-year-old contests. Let's go to the Curragh first up and have a look at the Beresford Stakes. It was a Group 2 over a mile, and Luxembourg was the 8-13 favourite, Swan Bay 15-8, and the others really unconsidered in the market, 14-1 and bigger, that trio. And it was Luxembourg who really launched his career here. This is his second career success. He was quite impressive when he won ears pricked on debut at Naas, but here he was wildly impressive. Dropped out by Seamie Heffernan. Here he is, out the back of the field, and Seamie rode him like a good horse, as they like to say. Rode him like a horse who has a smart turn of foot, and boy did he show it in the closing stages. The gallop was just ordinary. They didn't go mad in the early stages, and the overall time, it wasn't too bad at all at 140.88. But the visual impression that this horse created here was quite stunning, really. And I thought what Seamie Heffernan said when interviewed by Gary O'Brien afterwards told us that they knew this horse was very good. They know that they've got a special colt on their hands with Luxembourg. He's going to have to cut it against better company, and surely a Group 1 beckons for him next. Vertum Futurity, maybe the Dewhurst. You'd have thought he'll go for one of those. If not, they'll put him away, and he's definitely a horse for the 2,000 guineas next season. Heffernan happy to bide his time, knowing that he's got a horse with a sharp turn of foot. This is a race that trainer Aidan O'Brien has farmed. He's won the last 11 runnings of this, would you believe it? And he's won it with some very good horses. Now Seamie's just angled to the outside, and he's going to launch a run down the outside. He's got dead aim at them there, and this horse, when he's given a flick the whip by Seamie Heffernan behind the saddle, he really picks up in tremendous style. He's got to them basically on the bridle. Now Seamie gets after him. He's a bit green. Look at his head, carrying it a bit proud. Doesn't quite know what to do there. Seamie gives him a crack, and away he goes. That one flick with his left hand behind the saddle, and this horse changed his legs and flew away from his rivals. He beat Manier Cord into second place, Tuwake was third, and Swan Bay was back in fourth, but they were no match for this horse, who's now understandably quoted for the Guineas and for the Derby as well. You think he might stay the Derby trip ultimately, looking at his pedigree, and you just get the impression that they think an awful lot of this fella. He's destined for bigger and much better things. That was hugely impressive, if not on the clock. Visually, you can tell that this horse is very good. Seamie Heffernan was definitely enthused about this success. Gary spoke to him afterwards, and he compared him to Santa Barbara, who sadly is no longer with us, but he said they always knew this horse was very special. Aidan does well in this, doesn't he? Last 11 years he's won this race. He likes to target a good horse at it, and he's definitely got one here. He's arguably one of the best two-year-olds we've seen this season. What about the Derby then? He's a 10-1 shot. Currently 16-1 for the 2,000 guineas. You think on pedigree he would stay the Derby trip, and that might just be his primary target. Who knows? But he's a very, very useful colt, and I think they think a huge amount of him. Two-year-old entries that he's got going forward. Well, Vertum Futurity is definitely a possibility. His dad Camelot won that, so he might be going there. Possibly the Dewhurst over 7 furlongs at Newmarket. If you had to be picky about him in any way whatsoever, it's his high head carriage. It's a bit Monjeu-like, but he was really, really impressive there. We'll see what he can do when he steps into Group 1 company next. So we saw a very good horse in the shape of Luxembourg winning the Beresford at the Curragh, and we had a very interesting Group 2 for two-year-olds, the Royal Lodge, and it was over a mile. Corobius was the 85-40 joint favourite, with Mascala. Royal Patronage was 7-2, and there was a bit of money for one for the Gutter, 9-1. from 11s. This is a fascinating contest, it really is. And it was won by Royal Patronage, who jumped out of stall 1. He beat Curragh from 2, and Unconquerable was back in 3rd from stall number 7. This was an honestly run race. They went a pretty good gallop. The winner's out in front at this stage. It's not always the case. It's a fascinating race, this. There he is, out in front. And the second, just in there, the Godolphin Blue, just hidden away. But he was generally close to the pace as well, as is often the way at Newmarket. You've got to be pretty handy if you're going to win these races. Royal Patronage going along at a decent enough clip. The finishing speed percentage told us that 102.55, and he finished the race off in 12.67 seconds. He was getting quite tired in the closing stages, despite the fact that he got up late to beat Curragh, who was perhaps a little bit unlucky. Now, it would be a bit churlish of me not to give credit to the winner. He's a very good horse. He's trained by Mark Johnson. He was very tough and game here in the finish to get back up. But this horse that was second, shaped with an inordinate amount of promise, Curragh, and he put the race to bed with a sharp turn of foot before getting tired and had a target on his back late for Royal Patronage to rally and come back past him in the closing stages. And I always feel that if a horse quickens up and goes past his main rival in the run, if that main rival again then comes back past him late to beat him, surely the runner-up's just gone a little bit too soon. And if William Buick had his time again, he probably would have sat and waited a bit longer. Had he done so, I think Curragh would have won very easily. Look at this. William got after him just before the 3. He picked up between the 3 and the 2. He picked up again according to the course track sectionals, but now he's vulnerable late. And Royal Patronage deserves tons of credit for rallying in the closing stages and getting back up. And his last furlong of 12.67 seconds, Royal Patronage, is nothing flash. And that just tells you how tired the runner-up was getting, having given that big effort between the 3 and the 1, and then he was vulnerable. But surely, if his challenge had been just timed a little bit better, he would have won. And he remains a really bright prospect. He could be a Guineas horse, the runner-up here. Royal Patronage is clearly very useful. I think overall the form is pretty good, with Unconquerable running on back in 3rd place. But those in behind had no chance. Curragh had this race shot to bits. Royal Patronage was beaten, but then he's a bit green, perhaps, the runner-up. He's also tired. He's paid for that big move, and he's been run down late on. But I think his potential remains intact. The runner-up could be a very good horse, and we know the winner is a good horse as well. So it's a fascinating Royal Lodge, wasn't it? Royal Patronage, you've got to give him full credit. It's churlish to take away any credit from him whatsoever. It was a strong staying performance from him to get back up. What else can we say? Well, the runner-up Curragh is 7th furlong. Look at that, 11.28 seconds. He was surging clear of his field. He had them shot to bits in behind, but he paid for that effort. The 6th and 7th furlong really took it out of him, and he was on fumes in the end and very vulnerable. Final furlong for Royal Patronage. It wasn't that flash, was it? 12.67, but it was much quicker than his rivals. He's just staying on, really. Rivals in behind were well beaten a long way out. Curragh was very tired, and he's just outstayed him in the closing stages, but a slow final furlong from the winner. Finishing speed percentage, 102.55. No fluke at all whatsoever in this result. They've got an honest gallop. Curragh has put the race to bed. He's got everything off the bridle, and he was just vulnerable late. But I think it was an honest race, and you can trust the form. Wootton Bassett. He's becoming a really good sire, isn't he? There's Mark Johnson in the background there, watching his horse get up in the closing stages. And this son of Wootton Bassett is going places. He's going to be a strong stayer, I think. He'll be suited by 1.25 miles, perhaps, and maybe a little bit further next season. But don't give up on the runner-up at all, Curragh. If you're going to forget his name, stick him in the Racing TV tracker. I think he's a Guineas horse. So we've already seen some very useful 2-year-olds, and we're going to see another one here in the shape of Tenebrism, who won the Juddmonte Cheveley Park Stakes, going off a 14-1 shot for Aidan O'Brien and Ryan Moore, and very weak in the market. The favourite was Sacred Bridge at 13-8 and quite well backed. Sandrine was 3-1, and it was 6-1 and bigger the rest. But it was Tenebrism who was hugely impressive to land this from stall 11, beating Flotus into second place. Third was Sandrine and fourth was Gilded. Let's send them on their way then. And Tenebrism's just a little bit slowly away from stall 11 to Ryan Moore, and he's last at this stage, tucked in behind and angling across towards the rail. And I think the rail was quite important. The first, second and fourth raced against it throughout. But this filly is hugely impressive to my eye, and she's impressive on the clock as well. Her final time was 1 minute 11 dead. But it was her burst of speed that she showed in the closing stages that marks her out to be a remarkably good filly. And I'd hazard a guess that she's going to go close to winning 1,000 guineas next season. I think she'll stay a mile. Remember, this is 6 furlongs, but the stamina on the dam side of the pedigree, the dam Mortal Verse was very good. She won a Prix Jacques Le Marois, she won a Coronation Stakes. This filly's by Caravaggio, that's where her speed comes from. But the dam's side of the pedigree gives you hope she'll stay a mile. And watch her quicken up in a minute. Doesn't look like she's going to win there. Ryan switched her to the rail, and now she begins to pick up. And she does this. She fires the 6th furlong in 10.97 seconds. She's flying out there to go and get to Flotus, who'd ridden the rail throughout, but drifted off it. And look at this filly pick up. Another half a furlong or so, I venture to say she'd have gone 3 or 4 more lengths clear. I think she's very useful indeed. The overall time was very good, and the last 3 furlongs were very quick. 33.83 she's come home in. She's really flying out there. She's a very fast filly. This race has produced a decent time form speed figure, and I really believe that this is a Guineas filly. I think she's very good. And bear in mind, this run came off a layoff, and the market suggested that perhaps she might just need it. 10-1 she opened, she drifted out to 14s. She wasn't strongly fancied, and when Aidan O'Brien does fancy his horses, they never really go off at that sort of price. But she's surprised, I think, connections and plenty of watchers as well. But there's no fluke in this. This is a really good performance. She's got a sharp turn of foot, and she came home really strongly. It's a strong race, this. Sandrine gives the form a very good look, and Flotus has run well in second. But this, make no mistake, this is a really, really good filly. She's got a sharp turn of foot. Her last 3 furlongs, 33.83. The penultimate furlong, quick as well, dipping under 11 seconds. There's the last furlong, 11.77. That was miles quicker than all her opponents. Go to the Racing TV website, go to the results section, look at the sectionals. You'll see your sectionals for every single horse in the race there, and you'll see that she was much quicker than her rivals in the last 3. Winner is clearly very useful. I can't say that enough, really. I think she's very good indeed, and she, for me, is a live 1,000 guineas prospect. Nice pedigree. Mortal Verse was the dam. She won the Coronation Stakes. She won the Prix Jacques Le Marois. That gives you hope that this filly will stay a mile. And if she does stay a mile, the Caravaggio speed that she has got will be seen to very good use. Plus, it's a massive advantage that she's handled Newmarket well already. And that, to my eye, makes 8-1 for the 1,000 guineas, a standout price. I think she's the best filly we've seen so far. I think there could be a fair bit more to come from her. 8-1 for the guineas. Wow, that's very tempting. Let's move on now to the big handicap of the weekend, which was, of course, the Cambridgeshire over the 9 furlongs on the Rowley Mile. And it's a heritage handicap. 11-2 joints were Anne Martin, the very well-backed Chichester. Magical Morning, the mount of Frankie Dettori. He chose his horse over Uncle Bryn, both trained by John and Thady Gosden. He was third in. Astro King was quite popular, a 9-1 shot for Sir Michael Stout. And Ryan Moore, the winner, does not feature on that list. He's in the bar prices. In fact, he went off at 40-1, and he was Bedouin Story for Saeed bin Saror and Jamie Spencer. He jumped out of stall 21. The runner-up was Anne Mart, 22. Amethyst from 19 in third place. I think that's telling you a story about this race, that you really wanted to be drawn high. And therefore, watch Zosimus from stall 1, who ultimately finishes back in fourth and wins the race over on the far side for Donica O'Brien, and is one to note going forward. But this was just classic Jamie Spencer. And I've banged on the verdict about you need to be prominent on the Rowley Mile. Well, you generally do, but you can't ride Bedouin Story prominent. He wants to be dropped out and given time and brought with a late run. Perfect for Jamie Spencer. He also likes a big field scenario where he can weave his way through and make lots of late headway, and that's exactly what happened here. There he is. He's just about last, I think, last of both groups, held up by Jamie Spencer. And he eventually finds a passage through and gets up late to beat the strong travelling Anne Mart, who was always prominent and had about 5 or 6 length jump on Bedouin Story. He's a tricky ride. He's a quirky customer, this winner. Frankie won on him at Maiden at the Dubai International Carnival and got him up late, but he needs a proper ride. He needs waiting with. He ran very well in the Golden Mile at Goodwood, where he was hampered by a wide draw and a very poor trip. And then last time up at Chelmsford, there was no gallop, and that didn't suit him. But here he got a strong gallop. The pace was strong, and they came home pretty quickly in the closing stages. He did 35.01, so he's not a horse that's just picking up pieces. He came home fairly strongly according to those course track sectionals. He's weaving his way through now. He's beginning to find a passage. Uncle Bryn's, he's been a bit keen, but he's just about out in front in those green colours. Anne Mart in the Shadwell colours coming to challenge, and Spencer's made stealthy headway on Bedouin Story. It just looks like he's jumped in at this point, and now Spencer gets after him and he finds enough to go and win and beat horses drawn 21, 22 and 19. There's Zosimus over on the far side riding the rail, yellow sleeves. That's run a very big race, hasn't it? Back in 4th place, and his horse to keep a close eye on wherever Zosimus may go next. But it was just brilliant stuff from Jamie Spencer. It really was. It was a very tricky ride on a tricky horse. He had to find his way through a track that doesn't suit this kind of style. Spencer has executed it to perfection and got him up in the closing stages. He's a very talented horse. Things have got to drop right for him, and they certainly did on this occasion. There were some disappointments. Astro King, you see at the back of the stand side group, he was a big disappointment. He'd run well when we saw him at York last. Anne Mart's run pretty well. Uncle Bryn a little bit too keen, but overall Saeed Bin Saror and Jamie Spencer have worked the oracle with this fella. He's tricky, but perfect really for Jamie Spencer, who's enjoying a golden time at the moment, and as is Saeed Bin Saror. He had a very good meeting. We saw Benbatl winning earlier for him, and he wins the Cambridgeshire with Bedouin Story. Strongly run race. Winner flew home in the end, 35.01. It's arguable they went perhaps a bit hard out in front, set it up a little bit for him, but nonetheless, he's come home really well. What about the first 3? Well, a high draw I think was important, really. Getting towards that stands rail is really where you wanted to be all meeting. First 3, 21, 22 and 19. He's a bit quirky. I think he just needs a proper ride. It's no surprise that Frankie won on him at Maiden, and Jamie wins on him here. He just needs a professional ride, and that's what he got. Where will he go then? Well, there's plenty of big handicaps that he could try and plunder before the end of the season, you'd have thought, but perhaps Maiden will beckon for him again. As I mentioned before, he's won there before under Frankie, and maybe they'll go back there, but he'll always be a hostage to fortune, a hostage to the pace of the race. Well, look, here's a bit of self-praise. We flagged him up here on the verdict after his run in the Golden Mile at Goodwood, where he was very wide, had a poor draw, got a poor trip and ran an absolute blinder. So I'm kind of half claiming that one at 40-1. Well, after all the top-class action to the Curragh and to Newmarket last week, I thought I'd throw in a bit of a curveball and have a look at a 2-year-old performance at Dundalk on Friday evening. And it was the success of Angel's Wrath, who was a 92 shot and weak for the Johnny Murtagh yard, drifting out from 3-1. West Coast the favourite at 2-1, and Livia Celeste 100-30. But I thought this was a most impressive success from Angel's Wrath on debut here for the Johnny Murtagh team. Keep an eye on stall 5. That's where she comes out of. She's a Dark Angel filly out of a Danehill Dancer mare. This was her debut. However, she did run in one of the barrier trials here at Dundalk. So it's a good advertisement for those barrier trials, which have been very well received. She won that barrier trial in pretty good fashion, and she wins this race very well indeed once she got the hang of things in the closing stages. And I think she's marked out here that she's going to be quite useful this filly, and she might be a horse that sort of goes under the radar at this time of year because it's just on the all-weather and people are paying attention to other races that are going on at more high-profile tracks. Here she is, travelling very strongly in mid-division. She perhaps over-raced somewhat in the early stages. She was a bit too keen, and I wondered whether that would mean she wouldn't find much in the closing stages, she wouldn't quicken up, and maybe she'd be better for the run, but none of it. She clears away from these for a final time, which was all right. It wasn't too bad. It's 1:26 dead. She's come home pretty strongly by the looks of things and produced a good time. I think we've got quite an honestly run race, and the turn of foot that she shows is quite impressive, really. Angled out now wide. There she is. She's widest of all here, and she's going to come with a well-timed challenge. Now keep an eye on her when she first comes under pressure. She doesn't know what to do, and she goes markedly to her left. She hangs quite badly left, but then once she's straightened out, she clears away from her field and wins really impressively. Here she goes. Look, she doesn't know what to do. She's all over the place, and then she gets a flick of the whip and she straightens out, and then she clears away from them. She's very green still. She was only learning what to do in the last 100 yards or so once the jockey grabbed hold of her and straightened her up. And once he did that, she's gone away and won really impressively. I think she's a filly to keep a close eye on. Angel's Wrath, the name, by a Dark Angel, a nice pedigree, and trained by Johnny Murtagh, who can do little wrong this season. So, there's a week of top-class action. We've analysed some of it here on the verdict. This could have gone under the radar, this filly. I think she's pretty good. Barrier trials. We've mentioned them before here on the verdict and highlighted a horse that won a barrier trial and then went on to be very impressive for Joseph O'Brien in his first ever competitive start. That was here at Dundalk as well. And we've got another one here, another useful horse to come out of those barrier trials that are well worth keeping an eye on. Plenty of stamina on the down side of the pedigree. Now the down one over 1.5 miles, and that's what really encourages me about this filly, because she's a strong traveller, and you saw there she's got a sharp turn of foot. There's plenty of stamina in her pedigree. If she just drops her head a little bit with experience and settles better, she could be fairly useful. Trainer Johnny Murtagh, well, wow, what a season he's had, winning an Ebor with Sonny Boy Listen, winning the Irish Ledger with the same horse as well. He's had 39 winners now, and I think he looks set to beat his previous best, which was 45. Tracker, Racing TV Tracker is the place to put all those horses that you want to keep a close eye on. You'll be alerted as to when they are declared and when they're going to run. So it's well worth sticking Angel's Wrath in there. Yet another good 2-year-old that we saw here on the verdict this week. We analysed a lot of good 2-year-old races. I think Tenebrism is the best of the lot. 8-1 for the Guineas. Ooh, that's very tasty. See you next time.